Hi, and welcome to the latest edition of the Concilio Better Places podcast. I'm actually delighted that we've been joined today by Robert Sloss, the CEO of Hub Living. Robert, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
I thought it'd be useful just to kind of catch people up on your career in the development industry. So how did you start post-uni on the development career path?
Okay. I got a job probably more by luck than anything, right in the depths of the early 1990s recession. Somehow, Knight Frank and Rutley, as they were then, took me on. And I started work in the City of London, and it was an office market that was deeply depressed. Nothing was really going on. But it taught me how hard things can be when it's difficult. And I think it's a really valuable lesson to learn at a time like that and learn, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And I think that's often the right mantra for development. So I started there, did an MBA, switched over to becoming a principal, worked in private equity for a while, but I always had an eye to doing my own thing. It was kind of inbuilt in me to create my own entity. Started off with a transaction that was in RAF Lakenheath. That was a 640 house housing estate let to the US Air Force. Yep. And we bought that, and it was successful. And that was the advent of Squarestone, which was our first vehicle. Squarestone did a variety of different things in the office and residential sectors pretty successfully. And the most successful thing Squarestone actually did is it gave birth to Hub. Right. And came up with the idea post-GFC that there was a big housing shortage in what I would loosely call the mid-market. Funds were going into prime, super prime, residential in London, but I could see there were massive waiting lists in mid-market. You also had the advent of the Elizabeth line that was coming along. And so we had the simple premise that we should try to acquire sites along the Elizabeth line and cater for this undersupplied market. And also we could see that multifamily BTR was going to come to the UK, and we wanted to be one of the first movers in that.
So BTR, build to rent.
Yes.
Some of our audience won't be fully aware of what build to rent is.
Okay.
So you were one of the first in the UK to set it up. When you first set it up, I mean, this was over 10 years ago now.
Correct.
What was the general knowledge of build to rent BTR? And we'll call it BTR from now on.
I would say virtually non-existent. If I look at our first scheme, which was rehearsal rooms in North Acton, essentially that was a for sale residential scheme that we decided we would use as rental and try to fund with a big financial partner. It turned out to be UK's M&G that did that deal, which was just about the first institutional funding deal in the sector. And the product was, we had some shared amenity, but no one really knew how the amenity might get used. There were a bunch of flats that just happened to be in a building. And so I would say our products now are very different from that. We are probably generation 3 or generation 4 of BTR in the UK. Right. We've developed right the way through that cycle. And I think in a way, now we've come back to the beginning again, which is a simpler BTR product that perhaps has less amenity and more focus on purely apartments. So we've gone through that full cycle. The benefits of BTR in terms of what it offers people is a high quality, well-maintained apartment in a professionally run building. And clearly in the UK, for years and years and years, there's been bad names about rented residential accommodation. I think BTR, if it's done well, sets apart from just ordinary rented residential accommodation. And that's why I think it's important.
An awful lot of accidental landlords, I think, came post the financial crisis, didn't it? And that is the general myth of the rental market. But your product is obviously very different to the accidental landlord renting rooms out. Yeah. So institutional investment, I assume, would have seen in America the potential returns from the build to rent market, where I think it was far more established before it came to the UK. Yeah. Did you find institutional investors were welcome on day one, if you like? They saw the opportunities here, and that made it easier to get funding than you might have perhaps thought possible?
I think that perhaps the UK is always quite slow to pick up changes in real estate sectors, and multi-family BTR was no exception to that. I think there was a lot of cynicism at the time. Would it work in the UK? Would people pay premium rents to ordinary rented accommodation? So it was slow to start at the time as well. So between 2012 and 2018, you had a very strong sales market. So a lot of developers were like, why do I need to rent this when I can just sell the apartments? And that held the sector back for a long time. The other thing that held the sector back was there was no data, there was no rental data. And so there was nothing for people to hang their hat on and say, okay, those are the rents in that building, that's comparable, and therefore I can mirror that. And that was another reason why it was slow to develop. But over time, the trickle became a flow, and then the flow became a flood. And as more transactions happen, more institutions, more pension funds became confident in the sector and invested.
Okay, so you produced a report recently, Build to Rent, the Capitalist for Urban Renewal.
Yeah.
As part of a journey of Build to Rent, have councils seen that by having Build to Rent in early and bringing people in early, rather than relying on developers to sell off one flat at a time, you can actually kind of kickstart the regeneration of areas? And I presume you're repurposing a lot of buildings as well, rather than building from scratch.
Yeah, we do repurpose and we do ground up. My belief is that you have to be flexible and choose the right solution rather than just saying, oh, we only repurpose. There are certain buildings that are just not practical for repurposing. And I say that knowing that we do a lot of repurposing. We have been saying for a long time that bringing capital into city centres to catalyse and restart regeneration sites through BTR it's perhaps the magic ingredient in starting these big projects that are complex. If you are purely going down a resales residential approach, and you have to hit certain sales before you start, you might be waiting years for that project to start. The beauty of creating, as we have, for example, in Maidenhead, the centre of Maidenhead had been in decline for a long time. Our development, One Maidenhead, had sat around for probably 15 years, going through various ideas and iterations, going nowhere. We came in, got a big planning consent, and then we brought in Get Living, who funded all of the residential element of that and created the highest quality buildings in the town centre. And suddenly there's something to be proud about in the town centre. There are people there. There's a ripple effect in the shops and restaurants and leisure amenities around. So that is a classic example of how you can kickstart, make something happen where for years and years and years, nothing happened in the centre of Maidenhead. Yeah. I would argue we also did it in our Croydon site in Queen's Quarter, Wembley, and we are planning to do it in the Liberty Centre in Romford.
Yeah, no, we're lucky enough to be working with you on the Liberty Centre in Romford scheme, and it is quite exciting to see the aspiration of the council actually for Build to Rent to come in and kickstart it, as you've said.
Yeah, I think if you look at the Liberty, it's an asset that has perhaps an infamous history. It's not unusual in that the decline of the value of the shopping centre was absolutely precipitous. But actually, at the core of the Liberty is a central mall shopping centre that is completely viable. There's a lot of people who live there and a lot of people who want to shop there. So let's not lose that in the regeneration. But the peripheral areas of the shopping mall have declined. Ergo, there's a great opportunity to do something different, to mix the offer of what's there. And at the same time as bringing people into the town centre to live, the quality of the shopping centre is going to be lifted at the same time. So there's a much more holistic solution to it than just saying, oh, let's just put some flats there.
Yep. We've done a number of consultations for Build to Rent schemes. And what I find interesting is people who come to the consultations tend to be homeowners. Yeah. People 50 plus who just kind of don't understand because they didn't go on that journey themselves.
Sure.
But a 20-something now would find themselves. I always say I couldn't afford to live in the house I do now. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a home at the time when it was affordable. I wouldn't be able to do what I've done. Yeah. Starting now in my 20s. How do you think we can explain better the role Build to Rent has in solving the housing crisis? Because for so many people, owning a home is the solution, not rentals.
Yes, I think a lot of 50-somethings probably recognise that their children who are 20 and 30-somethings cannot afford to live where their parents lived. if you can offer a solution that maybe isn't buying but is a high quality residential solution, I think it is a very valid alternative. I think that increasingly, as build to rent gets larger and larger in the UK, which inevitably will do, it will be more recognised by people.
Right.
It just takes time to recognise this typology and recognise the quality of what's being delivered.
It's well, BTR provided 8% last year of new housing stock in England and Wales. How much bigger do you think that can get?
It's a difficult question to answer. In line with a lot of sectors in UK real estate, BTR, multifamily BTR, is really challenged from a viability perspective. If we can solve viability, I think if you just look at London, there's an almost bottomless well of demand for well-located, well-priced, good quality residential accommodation. The challenge is, how do we build those and how do we make those viable for people to invest in development?
Why is it, just a simple explainer for some of our audience who aren't in the development industry, what is the viability challenge and why is that holding back not just build to rent sector, but you could argue the residential sector full stop in London? But what is it? What is the challenge?
Developers are caught in a sort of 3-point pincer motion of declining values. So the values of build to rent have declined as interest rates have risen. Construction costs have risen and risen and risen, remain stubbornly high, and there have been legislative changes. And then the third point is Building Safety Act and Gateway 2. Building Safety Act is essential in terms of providing second staircases and fire protection. Gateway 2 is part of that process, but currently at the moment it's completely operative in terms of the time it takes to get through Gateway 2 is really, really unpredictable. If you add more unpredictability and time to the development process, you will end up with less development. You will end up with less people taking the risk to develop. Somehow we have to find a way to solve the time it takes to get through Gateway 2.
So how are institutional investors and other funders looking at development now, given the Gateway challenge?
With a great deal of caution.
Yeah.
Simple as that. There's a lot of institutional developers, institutional capital providers who would like to do development, but frankly at the moment will not entertain it until there's more certainty on the timeline.
It just feels to me this should be a front page story every day until this is resolved, given the real life challenges this is bringing, because we're not building enough homes, and this is a legislative change that could happen. And if you've got any solutions to what could be done? I
think the industry as a whole is really, really active in talking about Gateway 2, and I know that we are reassured that government has heard and is trying to solve the problem. I think there's still going to be a year, 18 months of slow process, but our understanding is that there will be a resolution. I would like to see something like the building warrant system that exists in Scotland, has existed for a long time, and it works and adds relatively little time to the development timeline. So there is a precedent in place, comes from north of the border. Let's not be too proud to bring that south of the border and make something that works, is certain and not time consuming for developers. And we will resolve the issue. Yeah,
well, here's hoping to that. And certainly if the 1.5 million target has any hope of being hit, clearly that needs to be resolved by the government. In terms of the hub offer, you mentioned at the start of Elizabeth Line. It's very notable when you look at where you've developed. It's next to transport hubs. Do you think that is a sweet spot for build to rent next to transport hubs?
Well, the name hub came about because of transport hubs, and
it was that eureka moment in my mind. I did one.
It came to me in the middle of a meeting, and I thought this is a good name. And also, where you live is the hub of your life. It was as simple as that. It seems to have worked. Yes, within the context of London, I think public transport is absolutely key to successful build to rent, as well as successful co-living. If you want to get the best out of urban life, you need to be able to move around the big city. Simple as that.
Yeah, well, when I moved to London, it was to live next to a transport hub. Everyone does. You don't want to be 45-minute walk from a tube or train station. It's not why you moved to London in your 20s. No. Really not. Planet People Progress is kind of one of the hub straplines. What does this mean, and how do you live it as a company?
Well, I think if you look at our, just a couple of examples, our repurposing program. So we were one of the first living space developers to recognize that there were going to be empty offices coming from the work from home trend. We actually historically owned quite a lot of offices, and we could see the writing was on the wall. So 4 years ago, we sold all our offices and immediately set up a part of Hub to focus on a change of use from office to living space. So we now have 6 sites that were offices. We're getting change of use to living uses. So we currently have the only sui generis co-living consents in the City of London, Beach Street, which is the Barbican, and Minories in EC3. So those two, I think, are kind of trailblazers for the ability to not just knock old office buildings out, but to reuse them. So we've got those. We've also got Southwark Bridge Road in Southwark, which again is another reuse project. So when we go back to our view on how we use carbon in the planet, we're very strong on repurposing. We're also building a wooden office building in Maidenhead as part of our One Maidenhead project. That is a requirement of the master plan. We're determined to deliver the whole of that regeneration. So when we talk about the people side, finishing that development and leaving a high quality legacy for Maidenhead, and not just building the residential and leaving 2 empty plots, is not the answer for Hub. Our answer is to finish this, deliver high quality buildings. Clearly, Trehus, which is Norwegian for wooden building, we are then creating something that's completely unique in the Thames Valley office market. Nobody else is building a mass timber building. So that development and the overall master plan really does encompass our planet and people part of what we do.
And as part of the evolution of Hub, it's noticeable you are moving into another new sector, if you like, in co-living. Certainly a new sector for many people to have come across. Just explain, what is co-living?
That is a good question, because it means different things to different people. Let me tell you what Hub believes co-living is. We think it is studio residential in urban or ultra-urban locations with high-quality shared amenity. And when I talk about shared amenity, the Hub brand standards really focus on health and well-being and co-working. And those are the 2 key metrics that we look very closely at when we're developing our products. And again, to come back to the thesis of transport, yes, within the context of London, be close to transport hubs, so you've got great mobility and you've also got really strong local amenity on your doorstep.
The shared spaces point is quite interesting, because I saw the majority of people who kind of live in rental accommodation in London, so actually loneliness and feeling unconnected from people is a major challenge for them. So the co-living is possibly kind of a solution to that for some people.
Well, we have 5 co-living sites in different stages of planning around the City of London. There's 550,000 jobs there. There's thousands of people coming into London the whole time who don't know the city, don't know people, don't know the geography, work long hours. The benefit of being often within walking distance of your office, having an instant social network in a building that is designed for interaction, I think it's something that we're behind the curve on. Should have been developed as part of the city's offer, the global financial centre, offering this kind of accommodation for people who may not be living in London the whole time, but want to have a valid experience whilst they invariably work very hard for the, shall we say, year to 18 months that they might be in London.
But yields are higher for co-living than build to rent. How are you finding the institutional investment market is seeing this? Is it going to be a similar journey to what you went on when you started Hub with build to rent, do you think?
I think new sectors are always they're always slow to start. There's always the lack of data that holds back investors. I think that is changing in co-living. I think also co-living had a sort of false start in the UK and got a very bad reputation. So I think those of us who've been in it, so we've been in co-living really for about 6 years through our Wood Lane project, trying to change perceptions on co-living and what it offers has been a big part of the journey. I think generally investors are more in tune with it now. I still think there's some way to go. Within the context of central London, you do have a proxy data set through high-end central purpose-built student accommodation that helps people understand where co-living fits. Yes, there is a higher yield for co-living than BTR. I think as co-living becomes increasingly recognised, I think that yield differential will close, and investors will look at co-living as a living rented accommodation offer, and they'll make decisions on a building by building or location by location basis.
You mentioned the City of London there as where your focus, a lot of it obviously with Lane as well, but the City of London is clearly a focus for your co-living. I mean, that's quite specific. In a population of 8 million, it's the square mile you're focusing on.
There's no accident in that.
Yeah. So do you think it can evolve out of central London or not?
I think undoubtedly yes, and it's been proven to work further out in London. I think our view is that it works best really centrally in an ultra-urban location. But undoubtedly, it does work and will work in zones 2, 3, 4, 5 in London. And will work in certain regional cities. But again, our belief is it works best in very urban environments rather than, shall we say, more suburban.
Yeah. Most underrated regeneration opportunities that you see, you're very clear that Hub can be a catalyst for regeneration. So looking around, firstly London, and then maybe the rest of the country, where do you see as the places that Hub could next go to really kickstart the regeneration, like you've mentioned in Maidenhead?
So the concept of regenerating, shall we say, underperforming shopping centre sites, there's nothing new about that. There are big challenges in turning shopping centres around, physical challenges. So I wouldn't say that's kind of some sort of hidden secret or anything like that. I think there's still an awful lot of public land that is underutilised. I think that if there was a greater understanding between developers of BTR and local authorities as to the benefits of BTR, the way it can kickstart and catalyse development, I think that public land could be used to make things happen, start things. And it won't be the only interpretation on that land, but it could be the thing that is the beginning, and then perhaps you can have other uses that follow on from there. But getting regeneration started is the key, and we have proven time and time again that build to rent is very, very effective at doing that.
That's an interesting point. So if you had a development of 200 flats for sale versus 200 flats build to rent, what's the difference in occupancy times, do you think? Because, I mean, 200 flats are not going to be put on the market at the same time, I assume. They're sold at different stages. So I just think some people quite listening might be quite intrigued by, I hadn't realised the difference in the speed in which you can deliver people living in an area that build to rent when you could for sale. What would you see the differences there?
That's a difficult question to answer. There's no question at the moment that residential resales in the UK are extremely slow at the moment. So I would say in terms of bringing people into city centres, if you fund and deliver build to rent, you will get a quicker result than perhaps waiting for sales to get to a certain level before you can start a resales program. If you build something out and with current sales process, it will take a long time to say sell out 250 units in a development. So as things stand right now, I think BTR is a quicker solution.
So what other trends should we be looking for in 2026 for next year? If you're crystal ball gazing, what do you think the trends are going to be? Where are Hub going to be looking?
I think you're going to see more investment in co-living. I think it increasingly is seen as a valid part of the living space formula, shall we say. So I think that is going to continue. I would like to see renewed commitment to multifamily BTR, particularly in Greater London, because I think it has so much value to give to.
What do you mean
people.
by multifamily? Sorry, Robert, just so people are clear.
Yeah, sorry, that's a slight joke. And that really means flatted developments in Greater London.
Okay.
And I'd like to see renewed commitment to that. We need to be tackling viability so that those homes are delivered. And also, as they're delivered, there's also a lot of affordable housing delivered with them. If I look at our Croydon scheme, Queen's Quarter, that was 52% affordable housing.
Right.
So this isn't just a private solution. This is also an affordable solution.
You've been on quite the journey in your built environment career. What advice would you give to someone starting today who was looking to start a career in development?
My number one recommendation would be, don't think you can make a quick buck in development. Go into development because it's really interesting, super challenging, and when you deliver things, incredibly rewarding. Yes, sometimes you can make money out of it, but I always say it's easier to lose money in development than make it. But go into development for the right reasons. I think it's the most interesting thing in real estate. I think it's the most challenging. I think it demands the greatest brains of our industry to get it right, particularly regeneration, when you have multiple interests that you're trying to bring together to get the best result. Look at it as a fascinating problem-solving exercise and how rewarding that is. And then the legacy of what you deliver. If you get that right, you will also get financial rewards. Yeah,
I suppose, like children, all of your developments you're proud of. They're equally loved. But if there was one development, just finally, which one do you look back on? You say you're talking about a legacy here. Is there anything that you've been working on, really from the start of Knight Frank to today, that you look back and think, yeah, that one really?
Everybody at Hub knows my favourite project. I don't have a favourite child, but I have a favourite project. Okay. It's our Maidenhead project. Right. And so One Maidenhead. Why do I like that? Because, again, going back to, we solved so many problems. There were still 17 ownerships on the site that we didn't control. We had to do a CPO, very complex rights to light. We went through various fluctuations, Brexit, COVID, before we funded it. We've got a great long-term partner in Smedvig. Working with that kind of long-term patient capital is incredibly rewarding in regeneration, and also just seeing the change of what we've done. So unambiguously, One Maidenhead is my favourite, but there are various others also that are close to my heart.
Yes, well, I imagine the case. Robert, thank you very much for your time today.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.